Good morning from here. I'm Barbara Bordalejo. I'm the chair of Global Outlook Digital Humanities, and we are here today to hear Benito, who is someone that I have met in the past, but will be introduced by James Akinola, my colleague at the board of GoDH. So James, please moderate this session for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Barbara Bordalejo. I hope I pronounced that very well. Okay, my name is James Akinola, and then today on the program, on the conversation, the GoDH conversation, a series that has been on for some time. We are privileged to have someone in the house in person of Benito Trollip. So I'm going to give a little background about our speaker for today. Mr. Benito Trollip is a researcher for Afrikaans, a language in Africa, especially among the South African. He works with the Center for Digital Humanity and Language Research called SADILA in South Africa. He has a keen interest in morphology, meaning of words, and more specifically, he's been involved in two aspects of the convergence of this. So during his time at SADILA, he wishes to make use of that opportunity to promote Afrikaans and develop skills in digital humanities, which will help actively stimulate research in Afrikaans. Though he chose to specialize in linguistics a long time ago, his passion is mainly on African literature, and is honing his skill around these aspects by incorporating digital tech methodologies and literature studies through writing on blog and some peer review article where he has contributed. Previously, Benito has been a part of a project that gave him exposure to POS tagging, semantic annotation, and archiving, mainly through the Northwestern University Center for Text Technology. He has written article. One of such is the linking morpheme in Afrikaans, a cognitive grammar description that was published in Case Journal of Theoretical Linguistics. On today's conversation, like I said earlier, Benito Trollip will be telling us about gender terminology research in Afrikaans with corpus data and how the collection can enhance and then make meaning for some of the findings in that language. So, ladies and gentlemen, well, as it will be, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Benito Trollip. I'll give him a virtual clap.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, I also want to say good day to wherever you are. And thank you for being here. And I am going to start screen sharing. So I really implore everybody to make it a conversation. I'm open to any comments, concerns, questions. If you're just curious about some things I'm saying. Yeah, so I have a PowerPoint I'm going to share, but it's more to give background and hopefully to spark the conversation more. So I'm just going to start sharing. Yes. Okay, so please feel free to stop me at any moment if you can't see. So I just want to make sure, is the screen sharing? Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to go to full screen. Okay, so James already mentioned the title or the topic of today. So it's gender terminology research in Afrikaans with corpus data collecting, enhancing, and finding meaning. So roughly the structure for today, I would just quickly want to introduce Afrikaans. There is, I think, not enough time in a whole day to talk about the whole history of the language. And after that, I'm going to discuss our collection of gender terminology, specifically a project I am undertaking with Dion du Plessis, which is another researcher at Sarila. And then the terminology and corpora, how they complemented or influenced each other. And I want to touch on pejorative terminology specifically, and then some details on what has been done so far and what we plan in the short-term future. Okay, so Afrikaans, just a short intro. So Afrikaans has been seen as an official language in South Africa since 1925 alongside Dutch. And then since 1961, it has been, it stayed an official language, but this time alongside English. And since 1996, it's one of the 11 official languages of South Africa. And so I'm not mentioning anything about the historical origins, since there are mainly two variants of the origins of Afrikaans. Some people attributing it to the Dutch coming to South Africa in the 17th century, and then a new stream of historical linguists finding origins before the Dutch, mainly from the Malay slaves that arrived in South Africa beforehand, but we are not going into that in more detail today. And mainly introducing now with more of the gender terminology. Afrikaans has a highly conservative part of the speaking community that I think maybe will be apparent in any speech community or any community. So ultimately, Afrikaans with a strong presence of Calvinism have very strong ideals about norms of the society, and the norms of the society translated ultimately into the norms of the language. So there are certain things we do not speak about, or we do not speak in conversation with a lot of people about. So generally, if people don't speak about it, there's no terminology for some things that society deemed not something to speak about. So officially, Afrikaans then, if you look at 1925, it's quite a young language, but it has good representation if we look at the use of it academically, online, informally. There's a lot of websites selling online goods that are in Afrikaans. So there's really been a lot of investment in the language in years gone past, a lot of financial investment, societal investment. And then the English Afrikaans, the English Afrikaans Wikipedia page actually has a lot of information, and I hyperlinked it there for anybody who wants to go read a bit more. So segueing into the gender terminology project Dion and I started in 2020, we collected gender terminology as we saw, I want to say, a growing theme in Afrikaans, especially with online pieces or blogs in Afrikaans and also about Afrikaans gender terminology. So we became curious as to the terminology that exists and basically if it is used more widely than in a few blogs. So we collected, these are not, there's not a full list of online pieces with gender issues being discussed, but just 3 we started with basically to spark interest in the subject before going into the corpus and analysis. So we also found 2 word lists. The one is the Chisimani's Queerpedia, and the second is CGE's word list. So Chisimani is a Chivenda word for stream of water. So it's a group of activists who published 3 booklets with gender terminology. So the one is in English, and then there's one in Afrikaans and one in isiXhosa, which is one of our other official languages. So they compiled it. Each booklet is monolingual, but each booklet has the same terms in it. And then CGE is the Commission for Gender Equality in South Africa. So it's a constitutional body aimed at promoting gender equality. They compiled a much larger list that was about, I think, in the region of between 400 and 500 words. So both of them are freely available online to download. They are also hyperlinked here. So the CGE list was rubber stamped in a way by lexicographers, so people who make the Afrikaans dictionaries, basically. They were consulted before the publication of the list. So yeah, I want to say the approach between the two lists are different, and they also, yeah, they don't contain exactly the same terms as well. So that was interesting. So from these sources, we compiled about 117 terms, give or take, as yeah, some were used interchangeably, while others only appeared once in one of the sources. So yeah. And then ultimately pejoratives weren't, I want to say, excluded, as some of them, yeah, it comes down a lot to interpretation when something is pejorative or yeah, defamatory. So we added, Dion and I, a few terms that brought us to close to 131 terms that we ultimately wanted to see in corpora, whether they exist. Besides in the lists and in the blogs. So the terminology and the corpora. So the Virtual Institute for Afrikaans, or VIVA for short, hosts online corpora. So this is our biggest, I want to say, open source corpus for Afrikaans. So there's different corpora. It's online. It's the comprehensive corpus, close to 250 million words, mostly edited texts. So there's even recipes, there's lots of word lists, a lot of novels or pieces from novels, and yeah, even poems. So mostly edited, very carefully chosen works of text. And then there's the exclusive corpus, which contains possible offensive texts. So you have to apply for use. Luckily, I do research, so I could apply to use this corpus as well, with close to 46 million words. So we ultimately wanted to query these words from the word lists and from the online sources in the corpora, knowing that it's not stratified completely. It gives a wide range of language use, written language use, but it's still not as complete. In an ideal world, you know, you want the biggest, better than data is more data. So ultimately, this is growing. The frequencies we have now is based on the current version, but I think somewhere next year they will be updated as well. So this is just a just an extract from the table, from the complete table of terms. And in the first column is the Afrikaans term. The second column we have the English equivalent. Then the frequency in the comprehensive corpus, the frequency in the exclusive corpus, and just some notes. So I'm just going to go from top to bottom. Yeah, if you have any questions about these, we can really discuss them. So the first one is gay, which stays gay in Afrikaans with a very high frequency. If we just look at the raw frequencies, without considering the 250 million words, we have to see these words in context. And gay seems, you know, as a very big general term used in especially the comprehensive corpus, but also the exclusive corpus. And the Afrikaans, also the Afrikaans list from CGE that was compiled with the lexicographers noted that just using gay may be perceived as pejorative. So they gave people the option to also use gay person or gay persoon. And then the second term is a very informal term in Afrikaans, skeef, which directly translated to skew or crooked. Sometimes, mostly it can be seen as pejorative. The frequency seems quite high, but that's because we still need disambiguation done. So skeef is also just a general adjective to refer to something that's crooked, like if you hang a painting against the wall, you can also just say it's crooked, it's skeef. So those frequencies are just preliminary. The same with morphe. So morphe is an extremely pejorative word, especially referring to more effeminate homosexual men. And these frequencies, as noted in the notes, also includes hits referring to a very recent Afrikaans film that I also just pasted a link to for those that are interested. And then morph as a extension, or technically a shorter version of morphe, which is even more pejorative if you want to try and rank them. Also still needs disambiguation, as morph in this sense has a lot of meanings, not only referring to a homosexual man, but it can also refer to a glove or a type of sheep, or being crazy. So it really, the context needs to still be assessed there. And then queer, we can see in Afrikaans, it stays the same. Queer stays queer, with a, the frequency is still quite low for a word that's also been taken to be a more general word referring to somebody that's part of the LGBTQ plus community. And then homophobia as homophobia. Just an interesting note, that's one of many phobias listed in the list. And I think it's very interesting because for me, a phobia is an irrational fear, but something like homophobia, a lot like xenophobia, I would say, comes down to being not hateful, but discriminating against somebody. It has nothing to do with irrational fear, I would say, but that's just the word we have. And then sissy basically stays the same, also a derogatory term referring to an effeminate homosexual man, with quite, I want to say, also general frequencies, so nothing special there yet. And then trassie as a pejorative word for for transsexual, also not a lot of frequency. And then seksloos as sexless. The Afrikaans term is used interchangeably, if we can see in the notes. So the corpus hits, first of all, there's not a lot, but they indicate the meanings of being sex being withheld from someone. So it's not in the sense of a gender identity. And in the CGE list, seksloos is used synonymously with asexual. So there's a lot of those, I want to say, cross references in the CGE list of Afrikaans words that can be used interchangeably for different English words. So that's also something we will have to address in the future of this project, in collaboration with CGE, of course. And then mofgat is an extremely pejorative word that also luckily has very few hits. But so morphe, mofgat, they are all, want to say, extensions of the same word, possibly different degrees of pejorativeness. The last one by far being, according to me, the most insulting, basically. So my specific interest in the pejorative terminology comes from my PhD. So I do a lot of research on pejorative terminology, and then I wanted to combine it with the gender terminology, as these words are, I want to say, used very informally between people, but it's not recorded because it has this taboo value to it. So it's not in official lists. those terms that are shown as pejorative are words like morphe that people, see quite frequently and can use. There's a movement to reclaim the word within the LGBTQ plus community. But in general, pejorative meaning is informal. It forms a group identity. It adds to it or it subtracts from somebody else's group identity. And it's generally defamatory, which adds for a lot of people to the possible humorous effect it can have in a specific social group. And there are gender-specific pejoratives. The ones in the table we showed are mainly referring to homosexual men, but there are also other types of pejorative words. And then more examples. So morph, skeef, and trassie was used in the table, but extensions of them, we found all three of these. I hope you can see them in the reddish color. So the reddish color is the Afrikaans spelling. They are all words that appear once in the corpora. So morphe pink as faggot pink, in the context, it has the meaning of very pink, and possibly the speaker does not either like pink or see it as a color representing femininity. And then morphe coffee is also used once as faggot coffee, which has the meaning of cheap or instant or weak coffee. So luckily the writer or the speaker describes what they mean by it in the same sentence. So that really helped with getting the meaning they wanted from the word. And then morphe scheidsrechter was quite interesting to me as a referee that, according to the writer, did not referee justly or fairly and really picked on his team. So he uses it as a general slur, completely without the meaning of any gender identity. It just emphasizes his frustration with the referee. So far and the way forward. So Dion and I presented at the International Gender and Language Association conference earlier this year. The abstract is hyperlinked there and the presentation is on YouTube for those who want to watch. So it also had more of a background on the linguistic purity that is a very strong element, or was for a very long time in Afrikaans, to find norms and to speak about different things and to speak about it in a way that has prestige, and you have to be very precise with your language. And it also had some of these observations from the corpora, different ones as well, because in the meantime we worked on it. And then we want to continue on the current trajectory, cross-checking publications with text resources. So Skeef is a book that was published earlier this year, where Ronaldo Schwab, so the author himself, went and did interviews with known LGBTQ plus individuals from the Afrikaans or from the South African entertainment industry. So the book is in Afrikaans, so it will definitely also add, I think, terminology as people speak about themselves in their own language. So we are definitely going to incorporate that book. And then 8 is a novel from a few years ago by a very esteemed Afrikaans youth author. So he writes for teenagers. And the book is about a male character who in high school discovers that he is homosexual, but he has a girlfriend. So there's a lot of, it was a really important novel, still is, I would say. And then the book also ends with tips for teenagers about if you struggle, who to contact, to find somebody to speak to. So, it combines a story, a relatable story to the reader, but also gives real steps for them to use. And then adding more sources, even more. So this is a recent academic article, Having to Use English, Others, Us, South African Terminologies of Sexual and Gender Diversity. So it's an open access article, so I also hyperlinked it here. And it's interesting, the paragraph referring to Afrikaans in this paper refers to morphe as well as a safe gender identity in South Africa, as it identifies a homosexual man as somebody who falls within what is considered a female role in society. So, if your friends call you a morphe, they refer to very stereotypical gay attributes, and it's safe for society because you chose a lane, and it's something that they can make peace with. And then incorporating aspects or influences from Gale. So Gale, I want to say was, as I don't know if it's used today anymore, but the anti-language used by the LGBTQ plus community before democracy, so during apartheid, when it was illegal to practice their lifestyle, they had to find a way to speak to each other without really being noticed by authorities. So, bye, donkey, and thank you for your attention. I hope there are questions or comments, or even if it was just a lot of fun for everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trollip. Benito. This is quite short but powerful, in my opinion. For instance, I've been able to learn how the language Afrikaans came to be in the history of South Africa. Then I was surprised that it's been that long, since 1925. Then withdrawal, maybe political issue, withdrawal of that language as official at one point, and then reinsertion again, restoration as official at another point in 1961 and all that. I have my questions, maybe one or two, but I think we should entertain questions from participants that are presently online. Is there any question? Can you clarify if you have a question for Mr.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Yeah.
Benito, thanks for a very amazing talk. I really appreciate all you've been able to give us to sit with. I'm thinking about core archives in South Africa that reclaim some of these terms in their own digital projects, and whether you have come across any of them. In what way do you think these archives, and I think I know one or two of them have come across some of these core archives, and I'm just wondering to what extent there's an investment in digital projects that reclaim some of these pejorative, terms here and there. That's one. And then two, generally, how does a digital figure into what you do? What kind of methodologies do you employ? What kind of tools come handy for you? So thanks again for a great talk.
Thank you, James. So we haven't found archives. So I would really appreciate if you can point me into the direction of one. I only learned last week that Gale actually has a archive for the gay and lesbian movement in South Africa specifically. So they have a digital archive of that. And then, like the example of the film, for example, the title is just morphe. So, that caused a lot of, it was very, very polarized, the reaction. So there were not a lot of mild reactions. It was all, either raving about it or, shutting down and saying the Afrikaans community has lost the plot and, we are all going to hell and, all those things. But yeah, there's definitely, like the book also with just the title Skief or just the title 8 or Out, I think there's been within the LGBTQ plus community, there's more of an engagement, but also generating the terminology, is quite difficult. I read an interview with a trans man this afternoon, actually. He wrote the book, his memoirs, really. And the person doing so he is Afrikaans, for example. He grew up multilingually, and the whole interview is in Afrikaans. So the questions and his reactions. And at the start of the interview, the author or the person doing the interview uses their own word. So they put it in brackets that this is my word for this. And that's really still a way that Afrikaans, people who want to write in Afrikaans about gender still needs to do those things, just to make sure that you give the English term and you say like, this is the best alternative I found. So if you're not sure what I'm speaking about, here's the English word. And I think even that academic article I reference later, the authors also say looking at English words that describe English identities is not always helpful, in an African context. So sorry, I don't know if I'm rambling or answering your question, but so that was the first thing, that there's really engagement, or either I've just become aware of the engagement quite recently, or it is recent. And the other thing, the tools at the moment, I'm just using regular expressions to query the corpora. And then there's still a lot, because the tagging of the corpora is not, all those disambiguation we still have to do by hand because it's not read into the system yet. So if you're going to look for only adjectival uses of this word, it will help you, but the problem is it's not accurate at the moment. So it's a lot of handwork that we have to reread. Some other time I have to call Viva and say, we have to redo these things just to make it a less daunting task. At the moment, there's nothing automatic except for the regular expression.
Great. Thank you. Yeku, are you okay? Okay, thank you. Do we still have any questions before I take mine? Okay. Well, part of my questions, Jennifer, do you have a question? Okay. Part of my questions have been asked and then inherently answered by our speaker for today. But in another form, I was just curious. I was thinking that, some of the words in Afrikaans, they sound very closely like they were taken from English. That what about having maybe a section to describe the etymology of that word? For instance, in my own language, we always have a description for every word, even if the word exists in another language. Okay, we have a way of describing it that will fit into our own cultural milieu, cultural reality, So I was curious to know if that is how the morphology of those words came to be in Afrikaans. Those words used for qua and all that. Are there any cultural foregrounding that actually help the creation of those words? Are they naturally created words, or are they just borrowing as a result of borrowing from English?
Thank you, James. So for me, like, I'm not a lexicographer. I use my dictionaries where I find them. I'm very thankful to the people doing that work. But I think specifically with gender, it's a very specific field. And for me, if I had to motivate, why are the words very English sounding? Like we changed a letter there to make it look more Afrikaans. And no, it's actually a very common thing. I think because if we can talk about the gender discourse, English terminology is quite, I want to say, as clear as it can be. So the concepts, that's why a word like queer and gay, if I could quickly think about two, were taken just like that, because the people making the lists realize that those words are used just like that in Afrikaans. So the whole, I want to say, essay or book or something can be Afrikaans, and then gay and queer are used just like that. So a lot of the times to instead of making a new word, because I don't know, this is also just from experience, a lot of the times when Afrikaans tries making new words, people doubt the meaning of the word because it's so new, and then it doesn't catch on because it's too weird, because somebody tried to be creative and make a word, and then some people are like, but that sounds not like a real thing, so they don't use it. They keep using the English one because they know the concept, and they know the people they speak to will know the meaning of that English word because they watch series or read books, or so we can, a word like skief has taken this very specific, it's a very Afrikaans word, very Germanic word, but it's also very pejorative, so not a lot of people will use it, even though it's, I want to say in brackets, a very Afrikaans word in comparison to queer or gay. People will not, there's not, I think if you had the option and you're speaking to somebody you don't know, you don't want to misrepresent, you won't use that word.
Okay, thank you. I think Dr. Barbara, you have a question?
Thank you. Well, this is, of course, not my specialty at all. So please correct me if I'm misunderstanding something or I'm wrong. I always thought that in English, they were very successful. The community, the LGBTQ plus community was successful at appropriating words that had been pejorative and making them mainstream and saying, sure, you think, we're gay, and then say, okay, we are gay. Or you think we're queer, but yes, queer it is then. And that has been very powerful. I haven't seen many communities in the world doing that. As you say, for Afrikaans, the word gay is very widely understood in other languages. So for example, in Spanish, very commonly used. It doesn't have any pejorative connotations in Spanish. But I was wondering if you have considered, and I know this is not what your study is, but if you have considered more like taking an active approach. For example, there have been lots of Wikipedia editathons, and I wonder if it is worth maybe appropriating some words in Afrikaans and having a community behind them and just going to Wikipedia and edit these concepts. Is that something that if anyone is doing or you would be interested in doing? Because it could be a powerful thing, I guess.
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, so I don't know about anybody, and to be honest, I've not thought about it, but it is really very good idea. As CGE, for example, when I told them before uploading their list, because before I came on the scene, they had this PDF document, massive piece of work that a lot of effort went into, and I'm like, but how are you distributing this? Like, if you want it to catch on, you have to actually give it to people that's outside of the few people who checked it to rubber stamp and to see if it's an all right sounding word and whether people will probably know it. And they're like, no, it's not on our website, it's nowhere. I'm like, but what's the use then? So I uploaded it to the repo, it's open, it's free. And I think having something like that is already good, but your proposal for Wikipedia as a very open, it's a lot of people go there first to see what something is about, and then if they become more interested, they will, find other sources. But thank you. I don't know about anybody. There's a very active Afrikaans Wikipedia community, but I don't know specifically with reference to gender. I'm not sure. I don't know about anybody doing something.
Just to say thank you for that. It's I think it's great research that you're doing, and it's very interesting also to trace maybe if things change with time and how they change.
I can remember there was also one talk at Igala Now, Afrikaans, for example, doesn't have grammatical gender at all. So, it never crossed somebody's mind in Afrikaans to think about gender versus grammatical gender. How do people, find, if you're in a conversation, but you don't feel like you have to match the gender with the verb, with the tense, and there was actually a talk from someone, I can't remember, that their research was with bilingual English and French speakers from the LGBTQ community, and they were asked, if you have to speak and you're going to, I don't want to say compromise, but you are going to make a choice between he or she. Do you prefer speaking English or do you prefer speaking French? Because they were fully bilingual. And they said, no, they would go to English because the agreement isn't, as, I want to say, important, or it's not.
But what about the pronouns in Afrikaans? You pronouns, don't you have a he and she? Like, because in Dutch there is.
Yeah. No,
okay.
We use he, she, they. They has, I want to say they has been in more frequent use. I think as it's growing as either a neutral pronoun or just non-binary, hulle has been used just like that recently.
Okay, Brian, I don't know if there is any other question.
No, like Jennifer mentioned in her comments, this is a area far outside my my area of study, but it's really fascinating. So I've just been enjoying learning a lot more about the language and about the use of these terms and terminologies in a language other than English for me. So I just want to thank Benito for the great talk.
I just remember there was something that you also said, Benito, that prompted this memory in me, because you talked about the word homophobia. And there is a quotation that is not right. Morgan Freeman never said that, but he now says, I wish I had said it. And I don't know if you have seen it. This is wonderful. Let me see if I can find it. I'll paste it here in the chat. There is, yes. See if that takes it to the picture of it. It's quite wonderful, I think. So what he says, supposedly said, I hate the word homophobia. It's not a phobia. You're not scared. You're an asshole. I thought about that. And it's very true. This is not a phobia, really.
Yeah.
You're just a bad, horrible human being. What is this?
Yeah.
So it made me think of what you were saying. And it's such a, word that passed to so many languages, but we often hear it and don't reflect on its toxicity, I think. It is a very toxic word.
Like I said, in that CGE list, there's a few phobias, and I'm like, but it's not phobia. It's like outright hate, or discriminating against somebody. Not allowing a couple to get married at your venue because you found out it's two men. And I'm like, people, that's not. What are you afraid of? It's just a venue. Let me see, is it open? Oh, yeah, I see it.
Yeah, and I think that there are no exact interpretation of some of these words, that we take to mean what they intend to mean. For instance, someone who attacks the other person because he hates something about that person, I don't think that person is scared of that person. Is probably out of envy or some other reality. So it is not fair. If you are fearful of me, you should avoid me instead. So that's just the way I see. So I think.
Sorry, James. I just quickly want to put the light on because I see darkness is falling. So just.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to quickly mention something. With reference to the language. So the one blog I reference, I wrote with a colleague from Stellenbosch University last year. Basically on if you're supposed to speak about things without having words, how are you supposed to speak about them? So it was, for me, it was quite enlightening to write that piece, specifically with reference to gender, and we reference words like comfet and bisexual erasure, which are not, I want to say it's more on the periphery of gender terminology. It's not, for Afrikaans, there's a lot more to do than focus on these, but it was interesting to talk about these two just as an example as, what are we supposed to call it if not that? Because if you're going to try and make it Afrikaans, it's difficult. And then what I connected it with this afternoon was that interview. The first question that was asked to the author about his memoirs was like, we all know your Afrikaans and English, why did you write the memoirs in English? And he said he was raised bilingually, but it was easier for him to write in English because it gave him distance to be able to write about his life, his experiences growing up. And it's interesting how language, a lot of people, for example, won't curse in their own language because it feels too personal, but they will curse in English because it feels, there's distance between you and your language. And I think that interaction with, with reference to something like gender becomes very interesting as it's very, I want to say human thing. So to try and distance yourself with language, and when it's not your choice to distance yourself with language, the interaction becomes very, very interesting.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Mr. Benito. I think on that note, we should, it's time to, okay, Jennifer, you have a question, right? Something to say? Okay, you are clapping. Okay, so on that note, I think it's time to go back to our chair, the president of GoDH, to give a final, the closing remarks, not final.
I just want to thank you all for being here, Benito, for giving this wonderful talk and actually doing such important research that is making me think now about how do we do this in so many other languages? How are people coping with it? What do they have to do? Which resources do they have? So I think this is very important to start a conversation. How I am very concerned about matters of inclusion, and I always think these are things that we need to reflect upon, and maybe sometimes be a little bit of activist. So I'm very, very grateful. Also, thank you, James Akinoma, for this moderation today, and all the members of GoDH, James Ieku and Brian, for facilitating today's technology, and everybody else for being here. So thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the new year for other conversations.